Hello everyone, and welcome to the last lesson in Chapter 4, which is 4.6, Solving Two-Step Equation Word Problems. Now, really and truly, this lesson is just an extension off of Lesson 4.5. So in that lesson, we talked about how to write equations, and if that is something that would benefit you, then I would take a second and go back and make sure you understand how to write equations. Here, we're going to take those same equations, write them, and then we're going to solve them. We're going to plug in for the variable. So since we've already spent a whole chapter talking about writing the equations, and I know we spent a lot of the chapter in solving them, we're just going to jump into examples, show you how to write equations and get them, and then also plug in and solve. So our first example is that Corey takes an Uber to her grandparents' house. The cost is $12 plus 12 cents per mile. If she rode for 58 miles and had $15 in her pocket, how much more will she owe when her ride is over? Okay, so I've read that problem once. I understand the scenario. We got Corey riding in an Uber. She's got some money in her pocket, but it's going to cost a lot more than what she has. We got to figure out how much more she's going to owe. So now let's go back through it and pull out some important pieces of information. Okay, first, we're going to take a look at the problem. It says, Corey takes an Uber to her grandparents' house. The cost is $12 plus 12 cents per mile. All right. If she rode for 58 miles... and I'm going to put that in yellow too, and had $15 in her pocket, I'm going to take that 15 and put that in blue, because that's kind of separate. How much more will she owe when her ride is over? So we know to write at least an expression of what we have is we have our flat cost of $12, and we have our variable cost of 12 cents per mile. So that ends up being that her total cost is going to be $12 plus 0.12 for every mile that she rides. Well, now that I've kind of written the equation or the expression, it goes into the next part. And it says, well, if she rode for 58 miles, well, that tells me that if she rode for 58 miles, that I can plug in 58 for that mile so I can calculate what her cost would be. So that means that I could do 12 plus 0.12 times 58, and then that's going to tell me how much her trip cost. So by doing that, I end up getting 12 plus 0.12 times 58. That ends up being $18.96. So that's how much her trip cost, was $18.96. Not bad for a 58-mile trip. But then we get to this blue part, and it says she had $15 in her pocket, right? We don't need to know how much the whole trip cost. We just need to know how much more will she owe. That's what I need to know. So, if the trip cost $18 and she had $15 in her pocket, she would only owe an additional $3.96. So, by taking that problem and breaking it down, building off what we did in the last section, we can get to our answer. So, we were able to write the equation based on the flat and variable costs of the cab, of the Uber. Then we plugged in for how many miles she rode, found the cost, and then we took off the $15 she already had, so she only owed an additional $3.96. Cool. All right, moving up to number 2 here. Number 2, it says the total cost, C, in dollars of renting a boat is C equals 12H plus 10. That's really nice. They gave us the equation here. C equals 12H plus 10. If the total cost for you is $58, how long did you rent the boat? Well, again, if this says that the total cost is $58, and we also know that total cost is the letter C, then I can rewrite this equation as 58 equals 12H plus 10. All right, cool. So I just plugged that value in for what I needed. Take a look at the problem, and now what do I have? I have a two-step equation, and we've already know how we solve two-step equations, right? Our first step here is to deal with our addition and subtraction, so we subtract 10 from both sides. The 10's on the right cancel, leaving me with 12 times H is equal to 48. And then we divide both sides by 12. On the right-hand side, the 12's cancel. That leaves me with H. 48 divided by 12 is 4. So we know that we rented the boat for 4 hours. Just like that. Okay, number 3. And this is our last one. It says Jill scored 25 more points than Gina. If they scored 95 points together, how many points did Gina have? Okay, so this problem is a classic type of writing an equation problem. Because not only are you having to write an equation, you're having to write an equation that compares one person to another or one thing to something else. We actually did this in an example a few sections ago where we had to say that like length was equal to width plus 3. So it's the same kind of deal. It's just a matter of knowing what to write and when to write. So the best way to tackle this is just tackle it one sentence at a time. So let's just start with the first one. So Jill, which we're going to call J, scored 25 more points. So basically we know 25 more points means plus 25 than Gina. And we're going to call Gina G. And that is a G and not a 6. I will rewrite that. G. All right. So if Jill scored 25 more points than Gina, then I know that Jill has Gina's score plus 25 points. All right, so now that's the first sentence. Okay, if they scored 95 points together, right, so I'm going to highlight that in green. If they scored 95 points together, so 95 points together would mean that whatever Jill scored plus whatever Gina scored is equal to 95. Okay, so on one sentence, I know that Jill scored 25 more points than Gina. So whatever Gina's score was plus 25 equals Jill's score. And then together, J plus G equals 95. So now, all I have to realize is that I've set up an equation where J is equal to something, and I have a J in a completely separate equation. All I have to do is substitute. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this whole piece here, this whole G plus 25, and I'm going to substitute it right in for J. Because I know Jill's score is 25 more than Gina's. So what I end up with is G plus 25, and then I'm going to switch colors just to make things easier, plus G equals 95. So now that I have this, I'm in a spot to where I've seen something like this before. I got some like terms, so that's going to give me let's use a different color here. Let's use black. 2g plus 25 is equal to 95. And now I'm just into a two-step equation. So I solve that by subtracting 25 from both sides because I got to do my addition and subtraction first. That ends up giving me 2g on the left is equal to 60. Nope, sorry. 70. 2g is equal to 70. So now, last step, divide both sides by 2, and g is equal to 35. And it asks me, how many points does Gina have? Well, Gina has 35 points. And we're able to solve that problem. Now, I completely understand that that last example was a little more complicated. Let's take another look at it really quick. So we broke the problem down by looking at each sentence because each sentence tells us some important information. The first one says Jill scored 25 more points than Gina. So Jill scored Gina's score plus 25. That was our first equation. We wrote it on the left. The second sentence says they scored 95 points together. So we take Jill and Gina, J and G, add them together, we get 95. Now that I have those two equations, I can do some substitution. The substitution then allows me to combine like terms. Then we can solve our two-step equation. Some of this is chapter 3. Some of this problem is chapter 4. But like we've talked about in several of the sections here, we can't just learn one lesson at a time. Lessons are now building on each other, and they're requiring you to know things from previous sections to help you solve problems. We can't forget that old material because we're going to need it to continue to work and move forward. Hopefully, this has helped you with lesson 4.6, and hopefully by the time you're done with this and you've taken the assignment, you're fully ready for the chapter 4 quiz because that's the only thing left after this section. But should you be struggling on something, should you need more clarification, please reach out and let me know.